Frank Turek defends his explanation of why God allows evil. The problem of evil is a real problem. Because on one hand, if God could not have allowed evil, why would he choose to? If he's all powerful, why would he allow evil in order to accomplish his goals? Why would he have to sacrifice his only son in order to accomplish his goals? He is God after all. He could have just accomplished his goals. So without further ado, I'm going to play this video right after this ado. I'm hoping that Frank will give me an explanation because this is my question. Here's the question that I am seeking an answer for. If God could not have allowed evil, why to accomplish his goals? Why did he still choose to allow evil to accomplish his goals? He could have, for a quick example here, let's just say that there's a volcano, right? It's a natural disaster, and I get the whole fallen world thing. This isn't God's ideal plan, whatever. But God could have just done a world without at least volcanoes, right? So there's a volcano, it erupts, and then like 75 people die, whatever. And then, but of the ashes springs a magical forest that produces delicious apples. Some type of good comes out of the volcano. And this was God's plan. He's going to use this volcano to accomplish his goal of creating a magical garden that produces delicious apples. This is, of course, a silly hypothetical, but I think it drives the point home relatively well. He could have just created the magical garden with the apples without the volcano. So why did God actively choose to have the volcano erupt, killing the 75 people to establish this magical garden? This is the question that I would like answered, not that question specifically, but you get my point. Let's go.
In your If God, Why Evil lectures, you justify the existence of suffering with a sort of utilitarian explanation by saying that the allowance of suffering leads to a higher good. But my question is that it doesn't seem
Frank and I both agree with that simultaneously.
good in the world outweighs the suffering, that it seems like it becomes worth it.
No, see, this isn't my question, because even if the good did outweigh, I get this is his question, and I'm not the one up here asking the question. This is a softball question. So he's basically saying the good doesn't seem to outweigh the bad, but even if it did outweigh the bad, why are you still, or if the good did outweigh the bad, why are you still allowing the bad to take place? That's my question. Just do the good. Don't allow the bad to take place. Why are you choosing to allow catastrophes and get the point. Let's go.
In the end, because most people who've ever existed and will ever exist are destined for hell.
First of all, how do we know that?
I guess we don't.
That would be the question.
How do we know what? That most people who exist are destined for hell? Well, because most people aren't Christians? I think that's a pretty good... the Bible? What do you mean, how do we know that? This is... Frank, this is your line. You say this. You believe this. If you believe that people who aren't Christians are destined for hell, of course, which most Christians do, because if you're not a Christian, then you clearly haven't accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior, you're destined for hell. And I think the last time I checked, the world was around 1/3 Christian, 33%-ish Christian, maybe a little less than that. So that would leave roughly 70% of the world. We can even lowball it at 65% of the world as non-Christian who are destined for hell. I think the argument that I could possibly see Frank making here is that the people who existed before Jesus, but there's got to be more people that exist now. Well, I don't know. Let's keep going. But the reason that you should know that, Frank, is because most people are not Christians, and non-Christians are destined for hell, right?
How do we know that? And then secondly, how do we know that evil that occurs in this world doesn't have good effects later in this world and even into eternity?
Maybe we don't know that, but that's not the point of the problem of evil. Maybe it does have good effects later in the world and into eternity. But why does God not just have the good effects? In fact, I'm gonna put a little bit more on top of this question. Why does God choose to have bad effects have good outcomes instead of good effects have better outcomes? All right, let's keep going. Maybe it'll be answered.
There's no way we could know that it didn't have those effects because of the ripple effect.
Sure.
For those of you that were up north last night, we went through this talking about the ripple effect, right? That every event ripples forward to affect trillions of other events.
Sure.
And for example, I mean, just think about the ripple effects in your own life. You wouldn't be sitting here today if your parents didn't meet. and their parents didn't meet,
Mhm.
and their parents didn't meet,
Mhm.
right? All those ripples, just people meeting and having children, allowed us to be here today. We can't trace all those ripples, but a being.
Get to the bad. Get to the evil. Get to the evil part, Frank. Stop beating around the bush. We get it. Things, current things are affected by their predecessors. We get it. But get to the evil.
Outside of time and space can. So we can't say that because something evil occurs today has no ultimate good in it. There's no way of knowing whether it has.
There is no way of knowing, but it's irrelevant. I can grant the argument entirely that an evil that occurs today has no ultimate good in it. I'm granting it. You know what? I agree with Frank. There's no way to know that it does or doesn't, right? Well, there might be a way to know, but just for the sake of argument, there's no way to know that it does or that it doesn't. But I'm even going to grant the argument. Yes, all evil things have good outcomes eventually. I'm granting this argument because it's not the point. Why is God allowing the evil to precede the good? Why not just have the good outcome? This is all God's plan, right? This is by God's design, right? I thought. No?
Has good or not in it. You don't have the knowledge to know that. Does that make sense?
You just got to pretend.
Yes. So
Okay.
let's
It
say
doesn't
that
make sense. It doesn't make sense. Come on, buddy. You know that didn't make any sense.
only 49% of people who ever exist are saved. Do you think that would be a theological problem? Do you think that somehow in the future that it'll come out in the end where most people are saved? Because I'm saying that it seems weird. It seems like God shouldn't have created the world if most people who ever exist are destined for hell.
Why? Because you're.
Well, this is changing the question. This is not the problem of evil. Frank is not defending an explanation of why God allows. This is entirely different. I wish Cross-Examined could accurately title their videos, because this is not the problem of evil. This is not Frank defending an explanation of why God allows evil. This essentially what the questioner here means when he says evil is hell. Why does God allow hell? Why did God create a world where most people are going to hell? That's the question being answered here.
What you're assuming there is a moral standard judging what God does, right? Here's something.
Okay, so you can scapegoat anything. If you say that no matter what this being does is good inherently because of the very nature of his being, you're just scapegoating it. If this being kills babies, it automatically has to be good because of the very nature of his being. That's stupid. Come on. That's such a weak argument. Well, you can't say that it's evil because he is the standard of morality. So he cannot, by definition, do evil. Like, all right, well, I guess, but I mean, then you have to admit that God commanding babies to be killed, which he did, was a good thing. You have to agree with it. You have to agree with this. And that's Christian morality.
God can't do. He can't force free creatures to do what he wants.
How do
because
you
if he
know?
does that, they're not free, right? If he makes them
Oh, that makes
robots,
sense.
then they're not loving. So in order for us to have true love and true moral choice, he has to give us free will. And if he gives us free will, it might be that even a majority of people freely decide not to accept the redemption that Christ has provided.
Because this puts people like me in a very strange position. I'm saying it right now. I am fully willing to accept the redemption that Christ has provided me to avoid eternal torture or damnation in hell. But I just can't. I can't accept it, right? I just cannot come to be a believer. I've really tried, in earnest. I have actually tried this. I've read books, I've studied, I've prayed, I've begged, I've done all the things that I've been recommended to do by all the Christians. I guess I'm just destined for hell because I just simply cannot come to believe. But let's keep going.
Is God obligated not to create at all because more people reject him than accept him?
What is all that?
Well, with utilitarianism, as far as I understand it, it's about weighing the good and the bad. So if more people go to hell, then under that ethical system, wouldn't it be considered
Well, God's
bad?
not a utilitarian. God can bring, utilitarian is do whatever is the most good for the most people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's smuggling in a moral law which defines what good is. Actually, I know this is going to sound a little bit odd, but
No.
if people sin and reject the salvation and they get justice for that, that's a good thing. So just because everybody isn't saved, that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. They made their choice and they don't.
That's not inherently true, though, Frank, because I'm not making that. You don't choose your beliefs. You're either convinced of something or you aren't. And you can try to educate yourself. You can try to look at the arguments, and you can try to convince yourself as much as possible to believe something. But you're either convinced or you aren't. And I'm not convinced, and it's not for lack of trying. So, what's someone like me to do?
Don't want Jesus. They don't want to be with God.
Again, completely avoiding the question, the title of the video, Frank Turek defends his explanation of why God allows evil. We haven't touched on this. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of this, but that's a Frank Turek video.
God in heaven. So it's not unjust of God to punish them. And as you probably know, Cole, God isn't going to punish everybody at the same level of punishment. He's going to be just in punishment. He's not going to punish an average unbeliever at the same level of punishment as, say, Hitler.
Is that true?
You read Luke 12 about this. It wouldn't be right.
Luke 12.
In the afterlife.
Honestly, this is the first that I'm hearing of this. It doesn't matter whether or not there's different levels of punishment because according to Christian morality, Frank's morality, the standard of morality, Hitler could very well be in heaven. He could, right? If he earnestly accepted Christ in his heart as his savior, right before he ended it, he realized his mistakes. He could have done this, right? Right before he did, and he thought the world a better place without him, so he just needs to end it now. And he realized his wrongs, and he realized that Jesus, maybe Jesus came to him just before he died. It doesn't. I'm not going to get too far into that. I'm just saying it's a possibility, right, that he could be in heaven as long as he repented before he died and accepted Jesus as a savior and all that good stuff. So he could be in heaven. But one thing's for sure: all of the Jews that he killed, God's chosen people, they're in hell. Christian morality.
Life, nobody's going to get a raw deal. In fact, you can look at it this way. There's only two things any of us are going to get ultimately. You're either going to get justice or you're going to get grace. Which would you rather have?
Can't justice
I don't
be
want
grace?
justice. If I get justice, I'm toast. But if I get...
Because all humans suck, all humans are sinners, all humans are disgusting, all humans are abominations against God. Yeah, we know.
Grace, and I freely accept grace, he gets the glory for that because I didn't do anything for it. He did everything for it. But if I don't accept grace, I'm getting what I deserve. And getting what I deserve is a good thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a good explanation. But then why then in your If God, Why Evil lectures do you use a utilitarian explanation to justify suffering if you think that utilitarianism ultimately fails?
Well, I'm not using a utilitarianism to justify suffering. What I'm saying is... I'm not using a utilitarian...
Why Evil lectures do you use a utilitarian explanation to justify suffering?
Maybe he's waiting next
if you
up.
think
Okay,
that
I see.
utilitarianism
Never mind, forget that.
ultimately fails.
Well, I'm not using a utilitarianism to justify suffering. What I'm saying is that there are goods that come out of evil that we may not see, and that's why we can trust God. I'm not saying God is playing a utilitarian...
Make sense of that statement, Frank, please. There are goods that may come out of evil that we may not see. That's why we can trust God. But this doesn't answer the question of why is there evil in the first place? Why? If God is perfect, that would mean that he could create a perfect world. And I know the fall. I get it. I understand the fall. I get the fall. But he still could have created a world without volcanoes, right? But he chose to add the volcanoes in. And my question is, why? If it was to perform some ultimate good, volcanoes, tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, cancer, you name it, doesn't matter. These evils are allowed in the world by God's design. Unless they weren't, and God isn't in ultimate control, right? But they create some type of good in the future. Why not just create the good? Why not have something good do something better in the future instead of having something evil do something good in the future? Why did the God choose to do it this way? That seems stupid, and it seems like a God who just likes a little bit of evil. If he could have created a world without evil and chose not to, he must like evil a little bit, right?
Utilitarian game. What I'm saying is that God allows free creatures to make their own choices, and he can...
And this is generally speaking, this is why I don't go with like the murder or, that kind of route, is because because of this argument right here. God allows free creatures to make their free choices. This is why I use natural disasters, hurricanes. We can't control a volcano, right? We're not making a free choice. We're not committing an act upon another individual. This is just nature, things that aren't evil inherently because the nature is not making a decision, but that have terrible, devastating, catastrophic consequences. Why did God create a world where by no fault of our own, except the whole fall argument, which I'm not getting into that in this video, that's a stupid argument, but these natural disasters, these aren't free people making free choices. A baby born with cancer is not making a free choice to have cancer, and yet we would consider this an evil. And even if this baby having cancer creates some good down the road, maybe if it creates a lot of good down the road, why did it take the cancer to get the good in God's perfect design, God's plan here? Why not just do the good thing? This is the question that hasn't been addressed. And if you made it this far in the video and have an answer to that question, drop it down in the comments below and we can talk about it.
Can redeem those choices even when we can't see when or how that redemption comes, because we're in this very small window of time and we can see very little. All right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cole.
Well, we did not get the answer to the question. I am not surprised. I'm going to end this video before it hits the 20-minute mark. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Please subscribe, please share, drop a comment below, and until the next